Chapter 7, Section 2, Part 1. The War Expands. The main idea of this section is that some Europeans decided to help America. As the war continued, it spread to the sea and the frontier. Why it matters today? Because this is the beginning of the United States' formal relationship with other nations. Key terms and names that have been defined for you through the Google Classroom: Ally, the Marquis de Lafayette, Bayonet, Desert, Privateer, James 410, and John Paul Jones. Please remember to have your Google Doc open throughout the video to complete it with information provided. One American story. To defeat the British Empire, the United States needed a foreign ally. An ally is a country that agrees to help another country achieve a common goal. The ideal ally would share America's goal of defeating the British. So the United States turned to France, Britain's long-term enemy. In 1776, Congress sent Benjamin Franklin to France to persuade it to be the ally of the United States. Famous for his experiments with electricity, Franklin became a celebrity in Paris. He wrote to his daughter, saying that medallions with his likeness were popular there. Quote, "These with the pictures, busts," meaning sculptures of the head and shoulders, "and prints, of which copies upon copies are spread everywhere, have made your father's face as well known as that of the moon." Benjamin Franklin to his daughter Sally. After America's victory at Saratoga, the French agreed to an alliance. This section explains how the war expanded with foreign aid. Help from abroad. France was still bitter over its defeat by the British in the French and Indian War, in which France lost its North American colonies. The French hoped to take revenge on the British by helping Britain's American colonies break free. In 1776, France began to give secret aid to the Americans. However, the French didn't want to lose to Britain a second time. That is why they didn't publicly ally themselves with the United States until after the Americans had proved they could win battles. After hearing of the American victory at Saratoga, King Louis XVI of France recognized the U.S. independence. In 1778, France signed 2 treaties of alliance with the United States. By doing so, France went to war with Britain. As a part of its new alliance, France sent badly needed funds, supplies, and troops to America. In 1779, France persuaded its ally Spain to help the Americans. Spain was also Britain's rival. The Spanish governor of Louisiana, General Bernardo de Galvez, acted quickly. He captured the British strongholds of Natchez and Baton Rouge in the lower Mississippi Valley. From there, his small army went on to take Mobile and in 1781 Pensacola in West Florida. These victories prevented the British from attacking the United States from the southwest. In addition, Britain had to keep thousands of troops fighting Galvez instead of fighting the Americans. However, like France, Spain's motives were not simply to help the United States. Galvez's victories helped extend Spain's empire in North America. By entering the war on the American side, France and Spain forced the British to fight a number of enemies on land and sea. The British had to spread their military resources over many fronts. For example, they were afraid they might have to fight the French in the West Indies, which are in the Caribbean islands, so they sent troops there. This prevented the British from concentrating their strength to defeat the inexperienced Americans. Europeans help Washington. The Americans gained some of the military experience they needed from Europe. Several European military officers came to Washington's aid, including men from France, Poland, and the German states. The Marquis de Lafayette was a 19-year-old French nobleman who volunteered to serve in Washington's army. He wanted a military career, and he believed in the American cause. He quickly gained Washington's confidence and was given the command of an army division. Lafayette won respect and love from his men by sharing in their hardships. Called, quote, the soldier's friend, he used his own money to buy warm clothing for his ragged troops. Washington regarded him almost as a son. Lafayette fought in many battles and also persuaded the French king to send a 6,000-man army to America. He became a hero in both France and the United States. Later, he took part in France's own revolution, so you hear more about him next year when you learn about the French Revolution. Along with Lafayette came the Baron de Kalb, a German officer who had served in the French army. He became one of Washington's generals and earned a reputation for bravery. Unfortunately, in 1780, he received 11 wounds in the Battle of Camden, South Carolina, and died. Another German, Baron von Steuben, helped turn the inexperienced Americans into a skilled fighting force. Washington asked him to train the army. In 1778, Steuben began by forming a model company of 100 men. Then he taught them how to move in lines and columns and how to handle weapons properly. Under Steuben's direction, the soldiers practiced making charges with bayonets, which are long steel knives attached to the ends of the muskets. Within a month, the troops were executing drills with speed and precision. Once the model company succeeded, the rest of the army adopted Steuben's methods. Winter at Valley Forge. Help from Europeans came at a time when the Americans desperately needed it. In late 1777, Britain's General Howe forced Washington to retreat from Philadelphia. Beginning in the winter of 1777 through 1778, Washington and his army camped at Valley Forge in southeast Pennsylvania. On the march to Valley Forge, Washington's army was so short on supplies that many soldiers had only blankets to cover themselves. They also lacked shoes. The barefoot men left tracks of blood on the frozen ground as they marched. The soldiers' condition did not improve at camp. The Marquis de Lafayette described what he saw. The unfortunate soldiers were in want of everything. They had neither coats, nor hats, nor shirts, nor shoes. Their feet and their legs froze till they grew black, and it was often necessary to amputate them. The army frequently passed whole days without food. The Marquis de Lafayette, quoted in Valley Forge, Pinnacle of Courage. So their feet were turning black because obviously they had no shoes on them. And since they were black, that meant the frostbite had gotten so severe that an infection known as gangrene had set in. And basically gangrene is when the muscles and all of the meat on your body starts to rot. And if that infection spreads to your blood, then you're pretty much done. You're dead. So what had to be done in order to prevent the infection from spreading to the blood into the blood was arms and limbs and feet would be amputated to save the soldier's life. Because of this, the name Valley Forge came to stand for the great hardships that Americans endured in the Revolutionary War. Over the winter, the soldiers at Valley Forge grew weak from not having enough food or warm clothing. Roughly a quarter of them died from malnutrition, exposure to the cold, or diseases such as smallpox and typhoid fever. Washington appealed to Congress to send the soldiers supplies, but it was slow in responding. Luckily, private citizens sometimes came to the soldiers' aid. According to one story, on New Year's Day, 1778, a group of Philadelphia women drove 10 teams of oxen into camp. The oxen were pulling wagons loaded with supplies and 2,000 shirts. The women had the oxen killed to provide food for the men. Despite the hardships, Washington and his soldiers showed amazing endurance. Under such circumstances, soldiers often desert or leave military duty without intending to return. Some soldiers did desert, but Lieutenant Colonel John Brooks wrote the Army stayed together because of, quote, love of our country. The men also stayed because of Washington. Private Samuel Downing declared that the soldiers loved him. They'd sell their lives for him. Another reason the soldiers did not desert was that Washington made a few examples of those who did. If you were caught deserting, you were hanged for treason in order to keep military discipline. Yes, then those soldiers can no longer fight since they've been hanged, they've been executed, but it did big time discourage any others from trying to desert. This is the end of Chapter 7, Section 2, Part 1. Please make sure you have filled in any questions that have been able to be answered through your Google Doc. And when you have completed the entire Google Doc after Section 2, make sure to submit it through the Google Classroom. And we'll see you in class tomorrow.